So, we're here to talk about post-Brexit world. So, I'm going to start, though, with a quote from Winston Churchill. And you'll get it eventually, honestly. So, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. And I'm adding to that, especially referendums. Okay? Because a referendum splits a complex question into a yes or a no. And 26th of June 2016, we were asked in the UK whether we wanted to be in or out, or we wanted to shake it all about, but we chose out. I didn't choose it, and I guess lots of people in the room didn't choose it, but that's what happened. And when we were planning for the ARM meeting at the end of last year, I stupidly, it turns out, suggested to Janet that it'd be a really good idea if we had a session on what the world would look like post-Brexit, because it'd all be done by then. But the 29th of March came and went. The nation remained completely divided, along with the politicians, remained completely divided. 2 years of negotiation got a deal that nobody liked because they didn't meet the two extremes of the views, and we got an extension. We got an extension to the 12th of April, and I thought, oh, thank God for that 12th of April. It'll definitely be done by then, because the politicians will be pragmatic and work together and get a sensible decision over the line. Well, here we are. It's now been potentially extended to by another 6 months out to October. There's actually European elections on the 23rd of May, and everyone's scrambling around to dust off those tired old British MEPs and get them to stand again, and that may or may not happen. We may actually have constructed a deal and be out by then. If the UK doesn't hold elections, we automatically go out, but I think anybody who thinks we'll construct a deal, that's a good target, but I wouldn't guarantee it, so there may well be elections. It may well string along. And that will really mean that there's a number of scenarios that are out there. I give this to the audience just so that you don't get tired of Brexit. Who's tired of Brexit? Yeah, okay, me too. Yeah, so, but you've got 6 more months of it possibly. So the Prime Minister had a deal that might go through. We might have a full renegotiation. We might have a second referendum. We might cancel it. We might have a general election, or we might have no deal. And Ian has been square and central on all of this for planning for all those eventualities that might arise. Now, the government position is for business as usual, with close regulatory alignment. But of course, the UK's had a great reputation for a nation that, even within the EU structures, has made the most of it to become a really good, innovative place for developing medicines. So what I'm really going to do now is explore where we are with that kind of innovation landscape and what might change going forward, because we still don't really know. So Ian, certainly over the last 5 years, we've seen lots more trials, lots of approvals. Can you take us through where you've kind of you've helped strategically set the agenda for getting that innovative development landscape going?
Sure. Just, if I may, a couple of words on Brexit and then answer that question. In relation to Brexit, in reality, we're planning for two scenarios. One is that the entering an implementation period, or the second is that isn't negotiated and we're in standalone mode. The government's preferred position has been that we ultimately negotiate a continued collaboration with the European system, but that has to be negotiated, and whether that's possible or not, we'll wait and see. But really what we've been doing in innovation is really independent of Brexit. And I think it goes back beyond 5 years, in that what I see is over a much longer period of time, there's been a real cultural change within MHRA, and I've seen other regulators across Europe and across the world, where regulators accept they have a responsibility to ensure safe innovation, to see that the benefits for public health. Now, we're not sponsors of products, but absolutely, when I first started nearly 30 years ago in this sort of area, in industry, regulators were a hurdle and distant, etc. And there's been a real culture change, certainly within the MHRA and others, that really says, well, actually, no, we must open our doors, we must be there to ensure safe innovation, to help companies or innovators bring products through safely to the market for the benefit of public health. So we've certainly put in place over the years a whole range of different mechanisms to do that. Innovation Office, yes, we've had something like 700 queries through the Innovation Office. We've also established mechanisms where we can give advice not only on behalf of medicines regulators, but bring in others, whether it's DEFRA for GMO, whether it's NICE, whether it's Human Tissue Authority, whether it's Human Fertilization Embryology Authority. So there's this one-stop shop for regulatory advice in relation to regenerative medicines. It has an acronym of RASRM or something, which doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but a one-stop shop. So we've put that in place. Scientific advice meetings, over 300 a year. Clinical trials area, clinical trials helpline, clinical trials meeting. Clinical trials unit has many meetings every year as well with applicants to support them. So many mechanisms. Further on down the road, joint advice with NICE to be able to bring both ourselves and HTA together to discuss what are the common endpoints we might agree would be of value, etc. So cultural change and lots of mechanisms really to support innovation because we want to see that all happen. On top of that, the government's put a huge priority on innovation with things like the Accelerated Access Collaborative, which brings all the players together and looks to streamline the whole process of getting products all the way through, which includes really close alignment of NICE, the HTA bit with the regulatory bit, and then rapid uptake into the health service. So a huge government emphasis, agency emphasis on really being very supportive, a very innovative environment. And that is Brexit independent. Okay.
And, the Innovation Office came into place after the, what was it called?
The cross-government review.
There's a cross-government review that you and I were in.
Yes, Mike Rawlins' chair.
That's right. Anyway, it came into place after that. Now, before that, things had gone pretty slowly because of the number of bodies that were involved. So would you say that one-stop shop was the key to it? And before that, they were nearly all academic trials. And since then, the proportion of commercial trials has gone up massively.
Yeah, I think the whole range of different things. That's certainly one, but also the science has moved on. I think the number of players in the field has dramatically increased. But that's certainly a key contributor to that, I think, to be able to bring everyone together through the one-stop shop that came out of that report 5 years ago.
So with that change, so again, 5-6 years ago, because we tracked this as the Catapult, I think there was about 25 trials, and now there's 80 trials, and that's moved to much more towards phase 3 trials and more commercial sponsors.
Yep.
So have you found the commercial sponsors have brought new thinking or new rigor to the table compared to the academic sponsors in the past?
Well, yes, I think that's right. I think academic sponsors motives are to explore the science, but sometimes are not so focused on getting to a regulatory endpoint of approval and commercialization, whereas clearly that's not the case for commercial sponsors. So I think it does change the nature a little bit, but the whole world's moved on. It's become much more mature anyway.
Sure. And of course, it's not just UK companies that take advantage of that. There's lots of international companies.
That's right. We see people from around the world.
Yeah.
And the great thing about the agency is we can bring in expertise across the whole agency. We're fortunate to have the National Institute for Biological Standards and Control as part of the agency, with advanced therapies team there. With a lot of expertise we can bring into that sort of environment as well.
A more recent innovation has been the joint advice with NICE. I mean, how do you think that's going?
We have two forms of joint advice with NICE. One is a more formal, probably the design of phase 3 type studies, where we give written advice, but there's also an earlier safe harbour type discussion that I think has proven more valuable. I've been surprised that there's not been more take-up of that, of the more formal advice, but there hasn't been, and I think others have reflected that as well, that people aren't really coming for as much joint advice with HTA people as doing it separately.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know, actually. I know it's certainly, we've seen, I know there's joint advice through the European processes, through the EMA as well, but in relation to the overall number of scientific advice meetings, the joint advice meetings have been less than one might have expected. It's an opportunity there, it's an offer, it's really up to companies to take it if they want.
Okay. And of course, we've also got the early access to medicine scheme as well.
Yes.
I'm not sure if everyone understands that kind of the operation of that, and that's on the existing rules and will continue?
Yes, what this is a way of giving regulatory support to unlicensed medicines being used in the clinic when for specific areas, higher medical needs, seriously debilitating illness, and company would make an application to us. There are two stages to the process. One is the first stage, PIM designation, promising innovative medicine designation. This is when there is a little bit of clinical data, but not enough to have any meaning in terms of access. But it means that this is potentially a candidate for the earlier access to medicine scheme. And actually, so far we've given, I think, 70-odd PIM designations, and it's been very valuable to companies to be able to say, well, we've got this, a major regulator has recognized this is potentially a very valuable product. It's sort of helped support for us to could put more effort into helping support their development, but it's also a signal to the investment community as well, and I think that's where it's probably been used most, people going around to the investment community saying, look, I've got this designation. The second stage, which is...
Similar to some of the other others that have been developed around.
The second stage is when we give a scientific opinion on the use of the product in the high unmet medical needs circumstance, seriously debilitating illness, before it's authorized, where we say that we think the benefits outweigh the risks in that narrow context of use. And so far we've given 23 positive opinions there, and I think over 1,500 patients have been treated following that. We expect products to be developed normally, get a license normally. It's in no way any substitution for that. It's just to give a regulatory opinion early on in the scheme. Other countries have got this. France have got the ATU scheme, for example. But it is a regulatory opinion that supports use to support prescribers using it in that circumstance.
Okay. So, I mean, that's all under the existing rules, and you rightly pointed out that with a deal scenario, then there's an implementation period of about 2 years. That's expected, and then the final deal that's negotiated. And of course, as you rightly say, the government wants business as usual, and Big Pharma wants business as usual because their thinking is mainly dominated by trade, I guess, rather than licensing. But beyond that, the potential post-Brexit world opens up some opportunities, and I know you've started floating different approval routes. So I think certainly the ones that I'm aware of are targeted, accelerated, and rolling approvals. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of the audience wouldn't really know the detail of that, but apart from the regulatory folk who are probably crawling all over it. So would you like to talk about the kind of thinking that goes behind the potential for these new approval routes?
Sure. First point to reiterate is the government's preferred position is a collaboration with the European system, if that proves possible. And we'll wait and see where negotiations get to. But if that doesn't prove possible, either we crash out in October, or because we haven't entered an implementation period, or at the end of the implementation period, it hasn't been possible to negotiate any continued relationship with the European system, and then we're in standalone mode. And certainly in relation to if we crash out, we've put out detailed guidance. It was available for the end of March, 29th of March, and then 6th of April, whenever it was, the various dates, in terms of how we would operate in standalone mode. And in terms of the licensing side, we would have three routes, if you like. We would have, first of all, we would offer a rolling review, potentially to work with people developing products to be looking at parts of the dossier through the development process and saying, yes, we're happy with that so far. We would offer an accelerated review. We could do it very rapidly, and that could be appended on a rolling review, or it could be independent of that. And the third area would be that if you came to the UK after you've been through CHMP, we would do a targeted assessment at that point, a rapid targeted assessment, to be able to grant a license around the same sort of time as the European systems, the Commission phase, the Standing Committee phase. So we thought that these are three offers that are available. Now, our intention is to stay as closely aligned as we can to the European data requirements, single dossier, same sort of dossier would work for the UK. We're not asking for different requirements, etc. So we want to make it as simple as possible, at the same time as taking a national decision at the end of the day. So that's the intent. Same sort of file, same dossier, same sort of requirements, and then either a more rapid, streamlined process in the UK or targeted assessment.
So essentially the same data packages would go in for a EMA review. That's right. For centralised approval, but also the opportunity for the first time for a national approval.
Yeah, I mean, if you use the same dossier and went through the accelerated route, you get it before the European system would. Okay. The timings would be better.
Okay. I guess, that for our sector, for the ATMP sector, that's probably sounds quite an attractive prospect.
I think so, and particularly things like the rolling reviews to get a view along the way. Now, at some point in the future, we can think about things like conditional approvals, etc. We need to be realistic that the UK is 2 to 3% of the global market, and asking for complete separate data sets isn't going to be realistic. But things like better conditional approvals and more support during the process, earlier approvals might be quite helpful, I think.
What's been your thinking? What's been your thinking around? Obviously, we got the European focus in the kind of post-Brexit world, but the post-Brexit world is the whole world. Yep. So what's been your thinking around the kind of non-EU approaches?
Absolutely. I think clearly, again, to reiterate the preferred position of continued collaboration with the European system, but if that doesn't happen, there are some other opportunities out there. There are other independent regulators around the world who already work together that I think would be very happy to be working with us. And I think in that environment, to have a number of independent regulators around the world collaborating closely, all wanting rapid timings with a thorough review, etc. I think there's some real opportunities out there.
Oh, okay.
We've had some preliminary discussions with some of these countries.
Okay. There are relatively few products on the market, but they're coming fast.
Yep.
The number of clinical trials is still building. How do you see the kind of appetite for trials in the UK and the harmonisation with trials in Europe and globally kind of panning out in this kind of post-Brexit world, no matter what the deal is?
Well, So far, we've seen no negative effect on clinical trial numbers. We still see in the UK about 1,000 clinical trials a year, applications coming to the agency for medicines, not devices are separate here. Last year, 65 ATMPs were in that 1,000 or so. Clearly, again, there's a question, what's negotiable, what isn't negotiable. Again, we would want to stay as aligned to the clinical trial regulation as possible. If we're not part of the EU and don't negotiate any continued participation, then the data generated is perfectly usable as part of multi-center, multinational trials. The two areas I think would be, the difficult would be, we wouldn't be part of the VHP single assessment across Europe. We wouldn't be part of the portal if that's the outcome. But on the other hand, we have a simple, rapid, thorough clinical trial approval system in the UK. That doesn't change. We have it now, we would have it in the future. Right. Just as now you can do trials in Switzerland, Australia, and add them to a multinational trial. So that doesn't change. So it's perfectly possible to do clinical trials in the UK. There's a huge investment from the UK in terms of the clinical trial infrastructure through the clinical trial network, etc., and support for your own organisation. Catapult's given a lot of support on the manufacturing side as well. So I think the infrastructure is all there, and that doesn't change, regardless of whatever the outcome of Brexit is.
Yeah, and I guess, we're talking about the UK mainly, but of course the EMA is going through the upheaval of moving to Amsterdam. Not everybody wants to move. MHRA's done a lot of the work, a big percentage of the work. In any divorce, somebody wants to keep the CDs. Which CDs do you want more than anybody else in? And I didn't tell him I was going to ask this.
No. I think it'd be wrong of me to talk about the EMA. What I would say is that we've had a lot of strengths in the advanced therapies area, with the clinical trials, with the new approvals, where we've led a number of the assessments, with the expertise we have at NIBS. All of that remains, and all of that will stay in the UK. It would be wrong of me to comment about the EMA.
Okay. And I'm showing my age talking about CDs collection. Everybody's
what
got
is a CD?
A CD. That's what us old folks used to use in. Yeah. Okay. So, if you read the papers, the newspapers, you would. One set of newspapers would tell you that the world's going to come to an end if we go out without a no deal, and another new set of newspapers tell you everyone's panicking and there's not going to be a problem. And you've put all of this, the no deal planning in place, and I know it's all on the website, covers GMOs, clinical trials, centralized applications, continued authorization, active substances, new assessment routes, orphans, licensing of ATMPs. Is there anything that you'd want to point the audience at to go and look at afterwards? So I don't expect you to kind of drill the whole 9 yards here, because there's pages and pages of it.
Well, we put a huge amount of effort into planning in the event of a no deal, but with the hope that we would end up going into an implementation period and then hopefully negotiate a continued relationship. But certainly we had to be prepared for no deal. Our philosophy going into that was to be as pragmatic as possible whilst still being able to assure UK public health. So I think things like batch testing and then release. We, for example, took a decision early on that we wouldn't request retesting of products that have been tested in Europe or released in Europe. We wouldn't require to be re-released in the UK. That's the general philosophy that we've taken, that we'll do what we need to protect public health, but we won't unnecessarily ask for repeats of tests, and we'll try to be as aligned as possible to. So we focus on public health, not the sort of tick box, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. So really keep any additional asks to a minimum whilst still being able to do our job.
Yeah, and there are some some ATMPs look like classic biologicals. Some are more demanding because we're developing all sorts of new routes. It's quite early to see how they're used. I know that, for instance, there are some of the new CAR-Ts are being manufactured and shipped across continents. Sure. Are there any considerations? I think there's been waivers put in place at EMA level for some of those, is that right?
I think the circumstances are, it really depends what's agreed at the time of the
Right.
assessment, and then I think in terms of the batch release work, it's in accordance with the license. So if at the time of the assessment it's deemed to be impractical to retest the product in Europe, but a QP can rely on the testing done in the United States, then that would be what would be followed by the regulations, the OMCL network.
Okay. So, I mean, when I think about this, I think about trade. So I think about, first of all, development, then licensing, then trade. And where, there's relatively little trade at the moment, but that's coming. So most of the licensing and development work we've kind of covered. So I suppose in that context, we've got about 4 minutes to go. I'm going to open it up for some questions from the audience, because I'm sure there'll be one or two, and we've got a few minutes. So anyone going to be brave and ask a question? Because I've been doing all the asking. So nobody has any concerns around the post-Brexit world, and you're looking forward to the new world?
Everybody's confident.
Yeah, everyone's confident. Oh, that's really good. That's really good. So, no questions? That's great. So what I'm going to do then is, there's only another couple of minutes to go. Most of you, many of you will know that Ian's been at the helm of the MHRA now for umpteen years, and has actually announced his retirement, which I think is September, right? So it's in September, and I'm sure the deal will be done by then. Yeah.
Well, actually, no. Will it be October?
October,
It may be then. So
you may or may not escape the Brexit clutches by the time it ends. But anyway, I think Ian's been a great leader at the MHRA, but also at a European and a global scale to really push this innovation agenda forward. So I'd like you all to give him a big hand and say thank you very much. Thank you.